Does the IRS ever plan to let the 1040 filer look online to see the estimated payments made and the date and the carryover like Illinois does? Well, I think it'd be, how can we find out? And that answer is, well, that is available now, really always has been, if you have a transcript for that client. So now with the TaxPro accounts, that's going to be something that's going to be available for us. In fact, somebody later on asked about the Illinois estimated payments. Go to the Department of Revenue website. All you need is the SSN and the first 4 letters of the last name and the year that you're looking for, whether it's 2020 or 2021. So that might be a reason to have some of your clients set up the TaxPro account and authorize you to access it if there is some sort of question about that. I know it's been a discussion point over the years. How come Illinois can do it, but the IRS can't? And I don't think I ever got a good answer for that. So, Catherine, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Great. So I am actually going to tackle the question that seemed to have gotten a lot of upvotes yesterday. So here's the question. If you have a 2-member LLC that is filing a 1065, good news, right? Multimember LLC, 1065. If one partner is bought out by the other partner, right? So now you've only got 1 member, then can you then file a Schedule C? And if so, how is the IRS notified? Well, here's the thing. If you went down to 1 member, you're definitely not filing a partnership anymore. And so on the date that the one partner buys the other partner out, that's a terminating event. Your partnership's going to terminate that day. You're going to file a final 1065 return. That's one of the ways the IRS is going to know your partnership has terminated. And then, yes, if you're a single member LLC, your default classification, assuming you're in a trade or business, right? So it's not a rental or a farm, your default classification would be a Schedule C, okay? We had some discussion as I was looking at this answer, because the question I had is whether or not we had to get a new ID number for the Schedule C, and or whether or not there was anything else that you would have to do. Keith, did we come to a final conclusion on that?
I was actually going to answer that EIN question next. So in terms of going from the partnership to the sole proprietorship, you mean?
Yeah. So the question that I have is, yes, we've gone from a partnership. We were an active in-business partnership, and now we're a sole proprietorship. Does the EIN from the partnership move over to the sole proprietorship, or does the sole proprietorship have to do something? So does the remaining partner have something else that they would have to do?
Yeah, I guess we didn't come to a definitive answer. It seems like the belt and suspenders approach would be to file an 8832. There's a line on there where it's you're an eligible domestic entity that's electing to then be disregarded. So I think that's what we'd be doing, because we're going from a partnership to a Schedule C. But I think if you just filed that Schedule C and started using the EIN, that would probably do the trick too. And that's more like what I would do in practice, just because, I wouldn't in the heat of battle think to go out and do the 8832. But I do have a related question, Catherine. I'll just go ahead and take it then, if that's good. It says if the sole proprietor, so this is a sole proprietorship, if they already have an EIN, must they get a different EIN if converting to an LLC, but remaining a sole proprietor? At first I wrote down, that's an easy question. The answer is yes. But then I thought, well, maybe I should just double check. So I went to irs.gov and I looked at when you need a new EIN, and I was surprised to find out that the answer is maybe, or as Jerry would say, it depends, right? So here's the bones of this, folks, if this was your question or you were one of the few that upvoted it. If a sole proprietorship has an EIN and then forms a single member LLC and the proprietor's name is still in the LLC, so suppose it goes from Bob Ray to Bob Ray Taxman LLC, then he wouldn't necessarily have to get a new EIN at that point. But if he takes on employees, incorporates, takes on another member, or has to pay federal excise taxes, then he would need a new EIN. So I would say best practice is if you've got a sole proprietor that starts an LLC, go ahead and just get an EIN for that LLC, because then you'll never have to change it again.
Good, Keith. I think there's also an EIN assistant. There's an EIN publication. There's an EIN filing center. All these kind of things about EINs you can find there. And there's a phone number you can use even to call the IRS. Does anybody want to do that this weekend? No, probably not. So, okay, very good. Jerry, I have just a couple, and I'll flip it back to you. My question is, I just lost my page here. Claiming the ERC for 2021. Does a partially suspended operations by a government authority make the employer eligible, or is it just declining receipts? Well, either one will make the employer eligible. Now, if they have to prove the partially suspension of operations, only the wages paid during the time period during which those operations are suspended will be eligible for the employee retention credit. If they qualify under the gross receipts test, then all wages paid in that quarter are eligible. There was a notice issued in March the 1st of 2021, a 102-page document, and I just lost that in my mind. It's 2021 I'm going to say 49, but I'm not sure. We had that up the other day. I'll let someone else tell me that exactly. But that notice says to determine partial suspension of activities, a suspension occurs when an activity in your business that generates more than 10% of your revenue or more than 10% of your hours. If that activity is diminished, then that is a partial suspension of activity. Do you need to issue a 1099-C to another business that you pay reimbursed expenses to? No, it's only for services provided. If that person charges you for supplies or tools, that amount is not included in the 1099 NEC amount. Jerry Bruin?
Yeah, we've got a polling question out there with lots and lots of possible answers. So think carefully. Again, of course, there are no wrong answers here. Another question on 1099Ks. I've always been surprised how many questions this section, which I thought really, wasn't a big deal. We've had a lot of questions about it. If we combine the 1099K income with other income reported all together on a Schedule C, how does the IRS know we included it in the income? Do we have to report it separately from other income? That's what I do. On the Schedule C, there will be a tab there for gross income. And so it provides a statement, which then will be transmitted to the IRS. And I'll say, income from 1099K. Sometimes I'll identify if there's a 1099 NEC, one from this place, one from this place, depending on how complicated that might get. But I'll have one item for that, and then I'll have another line item for other gross receipts. With the 1099K, with a business that is, online, where all the revenue is, from credit cards. So there may not be any other income to report, but I like to make it as easy as possible for my now former colleagues to find that. So I will show that in there specifically, and then maybe the other income, and then go on with the rest of that, Schedule C. Catherine, I'll go ahead and toss it to you, and I'll wait for it to come back around to me in a few minutes.
Hey, thanks, Jerry. All right, so a couple of partnership questions. I'm chuckling only because I'm glad to know there are some partnership questions out there. So here's one again from yesterday. In a partnership, when a partner dies, does the remaining partner get a step up in basis on real estate property? So here's the thing. When a partner in a partnership dies, nothing changes other than the fact that somebody else or some other entity now owns that partnership interest, right? When that partner died, there was something, state law, a will, a trust, and whoever inherits that partnership interest. In that particular case, what the step up in basis goes to is the interest itself, right? Not the underlying property in the partnership. That's where you have the 754 election to help begin to equalize that value. That 754 election does not benefit the partner who's been in there all along, only the partner who inherits that LLC or that partnership interest. So it's similar. Remember, the same rules apply if you have an S corporation and a shareholder dies. Somebody inherits that stock, nothing changes on the basis of the assets inside of the corporation. The basis adjustment happens with the stock itself. Same thing in a partnership.
That well said, Keith. That's a very complicated concept, just driven home by Miss Catherine. Thank you. Keith,
That's why I love teaching with her, Bob. She takes all the complicated stuff and makes it sound easy. Yeah, this is kind of an interesting question. Is an American citizen living and working in a foreign country and then taking a 2555 exclusion on their filed 1040 eligible for the 3 stimulus payments? And the questioner was kind enough to say thank you. The answer to that question is yes. If you're an American citizen and not making over the income thresholds, then you could be eligible for the 3 stimulus payments. Now, from what I was reading, I don't have any clients abroad, but what I was reading, this has become a little bit of a hassle for other reasons. Getting that money is difficult if you're abroad. If you were waiting on a check, sometimes getting it through the mail internationally was difficult. When you finally get the check, cashing it can be difficult. Of course, we know too, you have to file a return if you don't get the payment. But I think abroad or at home, probably the big challenge there was the client didn't get it. You reclaimed the recovery rebate credit, and then IRS said we sent the stimulus payment. So that little back and forth would go on for them, just like it does for us, except with the added challenge of probably being on the other side of the world potentially. So,
hey Keith, I'm assuming, I didn't look at this, but I'm assuming that the AGI limits for purposes of calculating that stimulus are going to be computed before the foreign earned income exclusion, right?
That was my assumption too, Catherine. Yeah, I guess that would be the difference. That wasn't in the question, that the person made, over the limit. So assuming that their income was under the limit prior to the exclusion, then they'd be eligible.